For those of you who don't already know, I am a huge Bond fan, like huge. I've seen every Bond film more than once, even the crappy ones. My dad raised me on Bond films, just like he did. He raised me on video games, Star Wars. Growing up, I always wanted to be a Bond girl. I know that's weird, like I wanted to grow up and be Bond's playmate, but no, for little Rachel, little pure innocent-minded Rachel, Bond girls were just the epitome of beauty. Just they were gorgeous, they were smart, most of them were smart, they were independent, just Bond girls were what I aspired to be. I've never stopped loving Bond films. We've had some shitty Bonds in the past, but we've also had some really, really great Bonds. I was definitely very skeptical of Daniel Craig being Bond for the first time back in Casino Royale. I mean, who was this blonde guy? I'd never seen him before. I know he had done other films before, but I'd never seen him in anything. So I was very skeptical, especially coming out of the Pierce Brosnan Bond age. I hated his Bond films. I hated him as Bond. He was way too pretty boy. Those Bond films were way too much about the explosions and the action. Bond films, classic Bond films, are about well-placed action and fight scenes scattered throughout really good story and good spy work. So I didn't know if this new guy was going to be able to pull off Bond. I'll tell you, the moment that I realized that I knew he was the great Bond was in one of the opening sequences of Casino Royale. He was like running through this, I guess, shanty village. It was kind of like, I think it was maybe like in Africa or something. And he was running and had to jump on this crane. He barely made it. Barely made it. Almost actually didn't make the crane at all. And that's when I knew he was a great Bond. Because Bond isn't super suave all the time. Bond's human. And sometimes he makes mistakes. And sometimes he doesn't make that jump. Sometimes he does mess up. And that's another thing I thought Pierce Brosnan Bond didn't do well. Daniel Craig does awesomely. So let's go ahead and get to Skyfall. I went and saw Skyfall. And of course, it was amazing. I can see why non-Bond fans or people who aren't super familiar with past Bond will like it, because it is a super, super awesome film, but it's also a great Bond film. It's got the action sequences and it's got the explosions and the fight scenes very well scattered through an actual over-top layer of amazing story and amazing acting. Not only that, but the small little Bond, classic Bond references. Some were small, some were huge. Like that part, okay, spoilers, I'm sorry, this is going to be a spoiler review, but that part where he's running away with M, and he opens up the garage door and it's Ashton Martin, and then the Bond music starts playing. Oh, it was so amazing. I was giggling so much. That's a Bond moment. That's a classic Bond moment. There was a ton of other references and callbacks to old school Bond, which of course I loved. Another thing I really liked about the new Bond film was when I was actually going in very skeptical was the new Q. The original Q, Desmond Llewellyn, was that his name? I might have mispronounced that. Was amazing, but he sadly passed away, so John Cleese took over, and John Cleese did a really good job, so why not use him? I love this new Q. They do make it a point to explain offhandedly that this is a new Q. Q is not a name, it is a job title.
Q 007.
And this guy definitely brings just a new awesomeness to the character. Not to mention, he's super cute. I love nerdy, dorky guys that work on computers. I would rather have a guy who knows his way around computers than knows his way around a woman, because that can be taught. I didn't find out until today. I was doing some research on everybody's names that he played in one of my favorite films of all time, Perfume, Story of a Murderer. Ben Whishaw is, I believe, how you pronounce his name. Super, super awesome Q. Loved it. Also, another big spoiler, but throughout the film, I'm wondering, where's Moneypenny? I haven't seen her. And throughout the film, he's kind of having this little sexual tension, like flirty, hardcore flirty relationship with the chick who was in 28 Days Later. And it really didn't click till at the very end when they walked in the office and he said, I haven't been formally introduced. I was like, please say Moneypenny, please say Moneypenny. And she did, and my head exploded, literally, all over everyone around me. For people who aren't super familiar with past Bonds, Moneypenny, sometimes she's young, sometimes she's older, is a girl, I believe she's like the receptionist to M, and she's always had this just sexual tension with Bond. They've never actually confirmed their togetherness, but they're always super hardcore flirting, lots of innuendos, and yes, that was awesome. And let's not forget, Xavier Barden I'm not good with a lot of these names, was one of the best Bond villains ever. He was amazing. One of my favorites is still gotta be Goldfinger. He's so proper, such a proper Bond villain. And the guy with the eye that would bleed, oh, creepy. But this Bond villain was amazing. It takes something special to be a good Bond villain because they've all got something, just something really special or cool, or there's something that makes them stand out than just some random bad guy. Great job, guy. Love you. Lastly, the few parts I didn't like about Skyfall was one, they were definitely minor parts, but one was the Home Alone section at the very end, where Bond went to his past house and kind of like built it up to be basically Home Alone. That's not Bond style, but it was short, it was cute, and he did do a good job. Lastly, my biggest complaint was there were no Bond girls. I mean, sure, there was the chick in the casino, but in Bond films, there's always at least 2 Bond girls. There's the one that he sleeps with and kind of throws away, or you end up finding out that she's been working for the enemy and she turns on Bond. And then there's always the Bond girl that stays with Bond throughout the rest of the film. She's the main Bond girl, and she's the one that Bond is usually fighting for or with. We didn't have that in this. If anything, we'd have to say M was basically the lead Bond girl in this film, although they weren't a Bond girl as romantic as they usually are, but yeah, there was no, true Bond girl of the film, which I miss, because again, I love Bond girls, and I would have liked to have seen, a true hardcore Bond girl in this film. So that is basically my review, my very spoiler review of Skyfall. Loved it, thought it was awesome, great Bond film, and stick around for my next video where I'm going to break down my favorite Bonds and my favorite Bond films. Thanks for watching, guys, and let me know in the comments what you thought of Skyfall.